Well, hey everybody, we're back with another Being an Engineer video. Today is my good friend Dwight Lee. We're co-workers at Tandem Diabetes Care. He's one of the associate directors. And as I think about engineering managers at Tandem, if you said who, in your opinion, is the most skilled of all the engineering managers at Tandem, it is unquestionably Dwight. And he's a guy who I always think, man, I wish I could work for Dwight. So. Anyway, without further ado, here's Dwight. And Dwight, can you start by outlining your journey? Um, what made you want to be an engineer? And in terms of your education, how did you become an engineer?
Okay, so how much time do I have?
Till midnight, I suppose.
Okay, just to go all the way back, I wanted to become an engineer when I was getting out of high school because my dad was an engineer. I
Okay.
actually had no idea what he was doing, but I actually didn't know what I wanted to do out of high school. So I just thought I'd go with what my dad did. So I applied for computer science. I've used software before, so I thought, why not go for software? And uh, a funny little side story, like right when I got into college and I got accepted into computer science at UCI, my dad bought me a computer and he watched me type. And I typed, with my index finger, and I could type about 13 words per minute. And he was like, "Are you kidding me? Like, you can't type and you're gonna do programming?" So that summer, I learned how to type with Mavis Beacon, and that was my start of software engineering, I guess.
Nice. Okay. Hey, I don't know if I ever told you that. I had a similar story where after my senior in high school, my parents gave me a typewriter. It wasn't even a computer, it was the old mechanical typewriter and a book, how to type. And they said, listen, you need to learn how to type if you're going to be an engineer. So, okay. All
Yeah.
right. So you went to UC Irvine
Yep.
and I think you went back. So in sum, how many degrees you got? What were they? And what are your thoughts looking back?
All right. So I got my bachelor's in Irvine, and I also went back and got a general computer science master's.
Mhm.
Um, and looking back, my undergrad, I focused on software engineering, just kind of more general. I really liked algorithms, but I wasn't particularly, it didn't just like come to me. The algorithms, uh, when I finally understood them, gave me great satisfaction, but it wasn't something that was so easy for me to pursue. So I didn't like try to specialize in that or anything. Um, so I did software engineering, and I found I liked being able to work in groups, being able to create something. Uh, Found that if you created something small and specialized and that it worked, it was better than something that was full of features and just didn't work. And that was something I learned in the last year of
Mm.
um, college. And so I kind of that idea kind of stuck with me for quite a long while. Um, After working or after the first job that I met you at Parker Aerospace, where I worked as a software tester. Uh, I worked there for 2 years, and I decided to go back and get a master's. Um,
Mhm.
and during the master's, I was also working at Boeing, and then uh, I took a long time to get my master's. So I also worked at a place called Crane Aerospace up in Burbank.
Yeah. Okay. So one of those two companies, I won't narrow it down just so, we don't get ourselves in legal trouble, and so don't you narrow it down either. But I seem to recall you telling me a story when you were working as a tester, you found a bug and almost got fired. Can you tell us that story?
Oh yeah, so very interesting. I was, you know, I was a developer at heart, but I was working
Yeah.
in testing, and we were doing two different types of testing. One of my fellow coworkers that I still work with today, he was doing a lot of verification or unit testing in this company, and I was doing some requirements testing, and I found a software issue. It was in Ada code. Interesting. This is the
Hmm.
only place I ever used that. Um, and I brought it up to the developer that had that error, and he wouldn't believe that it was an error. And I pointed out, uh, this is the software and this is how it behaves. And this is the requirement it's supposed to match. And it doesn't match it. So I think there's a discrepancy that needs to be resolved. So I thought I did a good job. I wasn't, confrontational or anything. Went home, came back the next, I think it was the weekend, came back on Monday, and I was brought into the manager's office, and I had been written up, and the engineer had said that I was causing trouble, and I shouldn't be causing trouble. So that was very interesting for me.
And this was on a flight system, right? I mean, this was on a system where bugs matter, right?
This was on a system where they hire people like me to hopefully find stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is, why do you find a tester if it's not to find bugs?
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you.
So.
Yeah, I cringe every time I hear that story. I tell that story a lot. I think I've already told the class that story too. So this is the guy that I told that story about. But the reality is you'd think in engineering that everybody will be open-minded and really wanting to collaborate together and relieved if you find their bug because then they won't cause harm. But that is not always the case. It seems to be the case at Tandem and a couple other places I've worked, but not everywhere. So Dwight, then, so you got this master's degree after you graduated, you worked at Parker a bit. What is your recommendation for the students listening? Do you think it helped you having a break and then doing it full, while you're working full time, or do you kind of wish you had just done it right after you finished your undergrad?
So, I can only answer for what I did, right?
Yeah,
Because I
well,
did.
I'm only asking you.
Yeah. So, I think I went back about 2 years after I started working, and I thought it was really good to understand, uh, when I went back, I knew that I could pick up skills that I could use in work environments.
Hmm.
At the time that I was working, I was still doing just software test and not applying a lot of the skills that I had learned in school. Uh, a lot of the principles still apply, but I didn't get to apply them as much. So when I went back, I was still able to pursue and learn a lot of the same, or go further on a lot of the same skills that I learned in undergrad. And sometimes it helped uh, when I could bring it back to the office and apply some of the stuff. Um, but the mistake I made was I did a master's in a general sense. Uh,
Mm.
I pursued algorithms again, a little bit more process. I did some more software engineering, some HCI, which is human computer interaction. So just general again, and I loved what I found. I found a lot of, or I learned a lot of new general things, and they have applied. Like I took a few classes in law, in terms of like computer science law,
Hmm.
and that was helpful just to be aware that exists. It's not by
Mhm.
no means an expert. Um, so I think looking back, if I were to do it again, I might uh, have waited longer to really see what is something that I want to pursue, uh, so that I could
Hmm.
build that specialization. Because I find building general skills is still more of a search than becoming precise at something.
Yeah.
So um, I think if I went back now, I might really, let's say, pursue something that's process oriented, or really pursue something maybe like data science or something that's similar to
Mhm.
something that you might be doing.
Okay. Hey, and you did both your master's and your undergrad at UC Irvine, and I did too. But sometimes you'll hear people who say it's a bad idea to do grad school at the place you did undergrad. How would you answer that?
So I have told people the same thing. The reason why I think it's not great that you do your master's at undergrad is uh, it's already familiar, and
Hmm.
you are meeting the same teachers. You might get a few new ones, um, so it's less of a shock. Uh, you're just comfortable, and you're just kind of extending the education. Now, it has its benefits too. Like, you know where to park. You don't get random parking tickets.
Mhm.
And you do, if you really love certain professors and faculty, you get to work with them even further. But I think for me, it probably would have been a different experience if I went somewhere where uh, it was just completely different and completely shocked me. It might have gotten me into a different state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, let's talk about the kind of work you do. You're a little bit unusual at Tandem in terms of, for the first part of your time at Tandem, you were doing one kind of software and now you're doing a different kind. Can you kind of walk us through that and tell us about maybe how you perceive those types of software as similar or dissimilar?
Okay. So I got a computer science major, so I'm familiar with in computer science they kind of run you through all the different types of software. Um, so when I started at Tandem, we were doing software in C, embedded software. So it's low level software where you have to be aware of how you're allocating memory. Um, if you want to make a function, even do something with a string, you need to get down to moving characters around, memory allocation, stuff like that, right? Um, so I did that for a long time. I don't know what quantitative, what is that, like 6 years, 7 years of that.
Mhm.
And now I've moved over to doing mobile development. And um, mobile development is object oriented, and you don't need to worry about manipulating strings as much. A lot of the stuff is written for you. Um, Even down to the language, we use Swift and Kotlin, and built into those languages are better ways to traverse loops so that you don't have to have off by ones all the time, or you might have missed like the last element. Those
Mhm.
are all built into the language to get rid of errors. So now it really gets you to focus on just way higher levels things. So those are kind of like I guess the main differences that I see.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that the level of attention is required for each different level. Um, so let me try to explain that thought. I recently had an interview with somebody, and they did a Swift function for me, a mobile interview, where they traversed a loop and they did it exactly as I would do it in embedded C, and I thought it was fantastic. It was, moved each character, did everything right, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. This is like, okay, let's interview this guy, bring him in, and he couldn't think at the higher level. He couldn't think like past, I'm moving these characters around. He couldn't piece together larger puzzle blocks. And that's
Mm.
kind of what's required in mobile development. So I see that difference in just in terms of like a little bit of a theme
Mhm.
in those two different types of development. But in general, in terms of like process and stuff and design, uh, you encounter the same exact pitfalls and errors, and a lot of the same methods that solve those problems in embedded
Mhm.
solve it in Swift.
Mm.
So what that has shown me or given me some confidence is I'm not as well versed in mobile development, but I'm still able to uh, see the same errors and where they lead, and still able to redirect.
Okay, hey, can you clarify that too when you say you're not as well versed in mobile, yet you're doing mobile? Can you kind of clarify for our listeners what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. So my role in mobile development right now, I'm acting as a uh, more of an organizer. So I'm associate director of mobile development right now, and my main focus is to make sure that I'm building people that can get down and do the nitty gritty, providing ways for them to do their software better.
Mhm.
Um, uh, every time I want to do some software, it has caused me to let the ball drop in some other aspect. Uh, and so my focus has been uh, more at a high level. And what that has not allowed me to do is do more development
Mhm.
uh, in those languages. So I don't have the common design um, uh, pitfalls. I haven't designed it and created a mistake for myself to know that I shouldn't go that path anymore. I have to uh, see it occur and
Yeah.
learn from that.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I'd be able to apply that to the next person.
All right. Good comment. Hey, and let's drill down on that idea of the difference between being, leading an effort versus being the worker. Um, often I tell new engineers, I think I've told the class, for the first 10 years of your career, resist any move to management so you can develop technically. I tell that to a lot of people, but when you and I met, you had just graduated. We're at Parker, kind of condensing a long story. We had to hire 50 people, and I knew I needed some lieutenants between me and them. And so I said, well, you've only been out of school 2 months, but can I make you a manager? And so you kind of were instant manager. But then when you came to Tandem, we gave you a chance to not be a manager and then really develop those skills. But can you talk to that about what are your views now on, was it a good thing to agree to be a manager when you did on the Hawker program, or should you have told me no? I mean, what's your take on that whole thing?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. Um, and it's a little bit different to answer it now. I really enjoy what I do, and it makes me really happy to be able to help someone get to a higher level. I always do miss doing as much technical work. Um, so I think it's true. This is something I learned in getting my master's. The main thing that I learned is you can't do everything at once, or you fail
Mm,
at everything. Right. So I think the biggest thing in terms of going into management is not that um, you instantly become like dumb or something, right? It's just that you learn in order for you to do this right, you have to focus on making sure everybody's got what they need, and you get their problems out of the way, unblock them if they have huge things that are blocking them, like roadblocks. So uh, you just learn that you have less time to do those technical activities, and,
mm-hmm.
and you'll have to find different ways to find that time. So if you have to do it on your own, or uh, if you can get to the point in your leadership style where you can delegate properly, you will be able to do some of these tasks. But until you get to that point, uh, if you try to do development while you need to be doing managing, you'll fail at both, and you'll be
Mm,
blocking along the way. So
good
um,
comment.
it's very much like priority time management type thing.
Yeah.
So it probably is wise to stick to doing uh, uh, a fair amount of development work upfront, engineering work, so that you can give yourself some experiences to rely on when you get into a different role.
Yeah. Good comment. Well, hey, I every now and then I'll be talking to somebody. In fact, I was talking to a group of high school students from Tesoro High School a couple days ago. One of the guys at Tandem has a stepdaughter who's runs a STEM club there, and so I ended up having a Zoom call with 30 high schoolers interested in technology. And one of the questions that came up was kind of the what's it like to work with a bunch of engineers? I mean, because we all know engineers are bad at relationships and kind of weird and all those things. And here you are, one of the most relationship oriented people I know. Um, talk talk to that. Can you? Has it been your experience that um, there's not much relationship in engineering, or is it lot? I mean, what's your take on this whole thing?
So especially at Tandem, but more so because I've seen it outside of Tandem, and then coming here, there is no way you can do high quality software for a long period of time without relationships.
Hmm.
You know, if you don't know Actually, what's a good example? So, like in sports, uh, the teams that stick together the longest, they build this rapport, and it's like they know where each other will be. They'll know why they're going to react a certain way, and uh, because of that, they can win championships together. They can
Mm,
win things. So translating that to software, we all are everyone's different. But when you do software, you're going to have tendencies, and you're going to, uh, because of your tendencies, you're going to have certain pros and cons. And the more you work with the same people, uh, you can adapt to those and understand why they would make those. And it'll make it easier for you to design together, and make it easier for you to find problems that you've created together, because it's just more predictable.
yeah,
And
great
besides the
comment.
fact, like, when you're trying to find things that are not working, it's really tough. And if you hate the person you're trying to find those problems with, it is going to make it tougher. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Um, yeah, that's a great comment. Have you experienced the thing where, because at Tandems, the core team's been together for a decade, and have you experienced the thing then where, because you've worked with these other guys and gals for so long, that you can almost you kind of complete each other's sentences as you're talking about things? I mean, can you do you have any funny stories on that or examples?
Uh, yeah. So it's like family. You someone. Let's say we have certain people in our group that might be a little more animated, or look like they're getting upset,
Hmm.
but it's when they really care, and they're anxious that the software is not working the way it should. It no longer is an event. It's just an indicator. So if you see it
Mm,
happen, oh, there must be some problem that we need to resolve there.
yeah.
Uh, and if someone's not someone that's normally very like uh, communicative starts talking, it just becomes a series of signals that are not verbal, that are just, it's like body language. So you don't have to ask to know. You just know. Like,
Mm, okay.
much like, so kind of like coding standards. We have coding standards so that we make our software uniform. And once it deviates from uniformity, there's potentially a problem. And so it's the same thing when you're working with the same people all the time. They have certain tendencies. If you see something that goes outside of that, then you're like, hey, that's different than what you would normally do. What were you thinking there? And then they just go, oh, like, oh, I don't know what I was doing there at all. And then they say, yeah. And
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Okay.
helps a lot.
Fantastic. All right. So that's good insight, Dwight. So you've got the attention of these undergraduate students. Do you have any advice for them? They're students in this class are either going to be engineers or applied physicists. Um, what what advice for their career do you have for them?
Ooh, so I think I had something thought up before I came to talk to you, and
Hmm.
I think I switched it a few times during this conversation. So I think it will be, uh, don't be too worried about what you get into first. Um, when I was getting out of
Mm,
school, uh, I didn't. I had tried many different styles of software, but I didn't even know what that meant. Like, I thought majority of software is probably going to be uh, on a desktop computer,
mm,
maybe TurboTax or something.
yeah.
Um, so finding Parker and finding embedded software was a mistake, essentially. I was trying to find anything where I could apply skill. Um, and it just kind of blossomed into where I am now, where I get to work on safety critical medical software that, never believed I could contribute to in college.
Hmm.
Uh, I remember when we came here and we talked about this software that is never supposed to reset. It's supposed to run
Hmm.
for days, months, years with
Yeah.
never resetting. If you were to ask me that in college, I'd be like, "Oh, like, what are you talking about? Like, there's no way I could have a piece of software unless it was very simple, or by accident run in infinity. It would just be an
Yeah.
accidental loop. So I guess the lesson I learned there is, don't don't be don't put too much pressure to get there really fast. You'll learn along the way, and before you know it, you'll be able to do software at this high level, as long as you don't stop learning and uh, don't stop thinking that you can't do it. Just don't even think about that. Just keep trying to get better, and then just
Mm.
one of these days it just is there, and you're able to do more than you thought you could.
Okay, good advice, Dwight. Thank you very much for that. I think that's about a perfect amount of time. So why don't we stop the interview here? But thank you very much. I appreciate your friendship, and we've been coworkers for how many years? We've been coworkers for since like 2005,
2004.
2004. We've been working. I guess there was a brief period where you went off to
Oh yeah,
Boeing and Cranes. There's about a 2-year gap
oh,
there,
that's
but
true. That's true.
boy, what an adventure this has been. I'm so glad you're at Tandem, and you've been at Tandem for over a decade, right?
I've been at Tandem for almost 12 years now.
12 years. Okay, fantastic. All right. Well, thank you very much, Dwight, and thanks for listening.
Thanks, Tom.